I am Thomas Miller. Once, I was a sergeant in the 741st Tank Battalion of the United States Army. If you don't count the years I spent driving a tractor back home in Ohio, my entire understanding of mechanics came from a 30-ton steel beast that spat exhaust and smelled of death, the M4 Sherman tank. It is 1985 now. I sit on my porch, watching my grandson play with his plastic green army men. He asks me, "Grandpa, was the Sherman the lighter that couldn't beat a Tiger tank?" I smile, though it's a bitter expression. History is always simplified into a few nicknames and stat comparisons. Yes, if you threw a Sherman and a German Tiger into the Roman Colosseum for a duel, 9 times out of 10, the Sherman would end up as a pile of burning scrap metal. But war isn't a Colosseum. War is logistics. It is mud. It is the delivery of thousands of rounds of ammunition per minute. It is the reality that just when the enemy thinks they have destroyed every last one of you, 10 brand new olive drab chariots rise over the horizon. Let me take you back to the spring of 1944, southern England. The air back then always carried 2 distinct scents: damp mold and the sharp sting of high-octane gasoline. Southern England felt like an ammo crate about to burst. Millions of Allied soldiers and hundreds of thousands of vehicles were crammed onto that island. Everyone knew we were going to the other side. My mount was number B14. The crew and I christened her Adeline after my first girlfriend, though Kowalski, our driver from Brooklyn, always complained that the name was too sissy for a killing machine. Adeline was an M4A1 Sherman. She had a cast hull with rounded lines, unlike the sharp, angular welded hulls that came later. At that time, she was all we had. You have to understand the design philosophy of the M4 Sherman. It wasn't born to be the strongest tank. It was born to be the most numerous tank. When we first laid eyes on her, that towering silhouette made us uneasy. She was too tall, like erecting a neon sign on the battlefield that screamed, "Shoot me." Her side armor wasn't thick. A German 75mm or even a 50mm anti-tank gun could punch right through at normal combat ranges. We'd heard the cruel joke: the Ronson lighter lights the first time, every time. It wasn't just a rumor. Early Shermans had a flaw in their ammunition rack layout. If penetrated, the ammo would often cook off instantly. But when you squeezed into that turret, smelling of engine oil and stale sweat, and felt the shudder of that Wright R975 radial engine kicking over, you felt a strange sense of security. That was the heartbeat of Detroit industry. It wasn't delicate like the German tanks. A Tiger might have thick armor and a terrifying 88mm gun, but it needed an overhaul every few hundred miles, and its transmission was as fragile as glass. The Sherman? You filled her up, didn't even need the best gas, kicked the track, and she'd run all day long. In April 1944, when we got the modification orders, I knew things were getting serious. "Get those damn canvas screens up," the company commander shouted. This was our secret weapon, the ace up our sleeve intended to shock Hitler's defenses, the duplex drive, DD Sherman tank. On this planet, aside from crazy Americans and Brits, no one would think to toss a 30-ton tank into the ocean and tell it to swim. We installed a massive waterproof canvas screen around the hull. Once inflated, this canvas ring provided enough displacement to make the tank float. The engine was connected via a gearbox to 2 propellers at the rear. We called them Donald Ducks. When Kowalski first saw the contraption, the cigarette fell right out of his mouth. "Sarge, you mean to tell me we're gonna drive this iron brick wearing a rubber swimming ring across the English Channel?" "Not across the channel, just the last few miles," I corrected him, though I had my own doubts. "We're going to give the Jerrys a surprise. Imagine the scene. Just when they think the beach is only crawling with infantry, 30 tanks suddenly rise from the waves. It'll be beautiful." Harris, our gunner, was wiping down the breech of the 75mm M3 cannon. He chimed in coldly, "Or we sink like stones and become the world's most expensive iron coffins." Harris was a pessimist. Unfortunately, on the morning that followed, he almost predicted the ending. Early June 1944. Portsmouth Harbor was choked with gray warships. It was a sight human history had never witnessed before. Battleship guns pointed at the sky. Transport ships were packed like sardines. We waited on a landing craft tank, LCT. The sea state was terrible. Everyone was vomiting. The smell of bile mixed with diesel made the inside of the tank uninhabitable. We sat on top of the turret, watching the dark gray waves hammer the hull. We got the briefing. Our destination was codenamed Omaha. The intelligence officer pointed to the easy red and fox green sectors on the map. This is the toughest section of Hitler's Atlantic Wall. Rommel has littered the beach with anti-tank hedgehogs, mines, and steel barriers called Belgian gates. The cliffs have concrete bunkers armed with machine guns and anti-tank cannons. If only the infantry charge, it will be a slaughter. He paused, his eyes sweeping over us tankers. So, you are the key. You are the first wave. The 741st and 743rd Tank Battalions will be the spearhead, landing even before the infantry. Your mission is to use the amphibious capabilities of the DD tanks, launch 6,000 yards out, swim to the beach, and use your 75mm guns to knock out those bunkers. Knock out bunkers. Easy for him to say, muttered little Joe, our loader. He was only 19, a paperboy from Kansas before the war. The days of waiting were torture. Due to weather, the operation was postponed for 24 hours. For those 24 hours, we sat in that swaying tin can, listening to the rain drum against the steel. Everyone wrote letters. Everyone prayed or pretended to clean weapons that were already spotless. I knew what the Germans were thinking. They believed in their premier tank killers, the Tigers and Panthers. They mocked American equipment as crude. True, in a duel on an open plain, my 75mm gun hitting a Tiger's front armor at 500 yards was like throwing a ping-pong ball, but they didn't understand the American way of war. We don't rely on duels. We rely on a system. Our Shermans had electro-hydraulic turret drives. We could traverse much faster than German tanks. We had vertical gyroscopic stabilizers. Crude for the time, yes, but they allowed us to fire on the move at low speeds, something the Germans couldn't do. More importantly, we had an endless stream of ammo and brothers. But all those advantages relied on one premise. We had to get ashore alive. On the night of June 5th, General Eisenhower gave the order. Okay, let's go. The roar of engines instantly drowned out the sound of the waves. The massive LCT fleet began to form up, heading toward that dark coastline. June 6th, 1944. 0300 hours. We were approaching the French coast. The waves were massive. This was absolutely not the sea condition for DD tanks. The manual said not to launch if waves exceeded 1 foot. We were looking at 3 to 4 feet, maybe higher. The battalion commander's voice crackled over the radio, full of static. All units, attention, range to target 5,000 yards, prepare to deploy screens. Kowalski yelled from the driver's hatch, "Sir, this is insanity, we're gonna sink." I saw it too. The LCT next to us dropped its ramp and the first Sherman DD slid into the water. The moment it hit, a giant wave slapped it sideways. The canvas screen shuddered violently in the wind. "Shut up, Kowalski." I forced myself to sound calm, though my knuckles were white as I gripped the periscope. "Engage propellers. Check air pressure. We are the infantry's only hope." It wasn't just an order, it was a fact. If we didn't get on that beach, those thousands of boys with M1 Garands would be harvested like wheat by German MG-42s. B-14, launch! With a tremendous roar and a splash of salt water, Adeline left the steel deck of the landing craft and plunged into the freezing Atlantic. The sensation of that moment stays with you forever. You are sitting in a 30-ton tank, yet you feel like you're in a canoe. Waves washed over the bow, slapping the canvas. If the canvas tore, or if a wave swamped the engine intake, we would drop like a stone. Around us, it was a catastrophe. I poked my head out of the commander's cupola. Through the spraying salt, I saw a heartbreaking scene. To my left, a Sherman from B Company had been in the water less than 2 minutes when a rogue wave collapsed its rear screen struts. Water flooded in. Within seconds, the tank vanished, leaving only a few crewmen struggling on the surface before the cold sea swallowed them. B-12 is down. B-9 is taking on water. Jesus, they're sinking, Harris screamed into the headset. The tragedy of the 741st was unfolding. We had to swim thousands of yards to shore, a distance far too great for the DDS in this weather. Our planned surprise attack was turning into a shipwreck. "Bilge pumps to maximum," I roared into the throat mic. "Don't look at the others. Eyes on the target. That church steeple. Keep her steady on that." We struggled like drunks between the peaks and troughs of the waves. Every minute felt like a century. I watched other tanks disappear one by one. Of the 32 DD tanks scheduled to swim ashore, the vast majority sank far from the beach. We were one of the lucky few, or maybe God was playing a joke and just wanted us to die a little later. Finally, through the morning mist and the smoke of German artillery, I saw that strip of yellow sand, Omaha Beach. At that same moment, the Germans woke up. It started with sporadic gunfire, then turned into a storm. Artillery along the German line began to thunder. Geysers of water erupted around us. "That's the sound of 88s, Kowalski yelled. "That's 75mm PaK-40s, Harris corrected, and mortars." Our canvas screen had taken a few hits. Water was seeping in. "Almost there. Retract propellers. Prepare for track contact," I ordered. When the tracks bit into the sandy seabed, a solid vibration ran through the chassis. That was the feeling of life. Adeline surged out of the water. We hit the button to blow the explosive bolts holding the screen struts, the key design of the DD tank. In 1 second, we shed the flotation gear and became a fighting tank again. But the sight before me choked the breath from my lungs. This wasn't a training landing. It was a slaughterhouse. Infantry landing craft were grounding behind us. The moment the ramps dropped, German machine gun fire swept into the holds like rain. Young soldiers were cut down before their boots even touched French soil. The surf was dyed crimson. There were severed limbs everywhere, screams for medics everywhere. And on the sand, there was almost no cover. No heavy weapons. The infantry were pinned down behind the shingle bank at the edge of the beach, unable to lift their heads. The Germans in the bunkers were firing with impunity. The Germans were shocked. Yes, despite the catastrophic loss of our DD tanks, a few of us had crawled onto the beach. Others were delivered directly to the sand by daring LCT captains who rammed the beach to offload regular Shermans. For the German defenders, it was a nightmare. They thought they were facing only flesh and blood, that their machine guns could dominate everything. But suddenly, through the smoke, amidst the piles of bodies and wreckage, that familiar, tall, olive-drab silhouette emerged. The M4 Sherman. We were the only heavy firepower on that beach capable of moving and shooting back. "He! 11 o'clock! That concrete bunker! It's butchering a company!" I screamed, my voice cracking. The turret whipped around, humming with the sound of hydraulics. "Target identified! Fire! Boom!" The 75mm gun recoiled violently. An M48 high-explosive shell screamed out, drilling precisely into the firing slit, spitting tongues of flame. It was a concrete emplacement housing a 75mm gun. Smoke and dust spewed from the bunker. That rabid machine gun went silent instantly. Direct hit! Damn it! Give them another one. That was the moment we made the Germans understand one thing. The Atlantic Wall was not invincible. But we weren't safe. This was Omaha. Every inch of air was filled with shrapnel. Clang! A massive impact rang out, like a giant striking a bell. The whole tank shuddered violently, and my ears rang. "We're hit," Joe shrieked. I quickly checked the interior. No fire, no smoke. "Report!" "Right track fender is blown off, but armor didn't penetrate," Kowalski yelled. "Probably an anti-tank rifle or small caliber gun." The Sherman's front armor was 51 millimeters and sloped. It wouldn't stop an 88, but at this range, we had a prayer against lighter anti-tank weapons. Don't stop. If we stop, we're a sitting duck. Push forward. Cover those infantry. Through my periscope, I saw dozens of infantrymen huddled behind our tank, their only mobile cover. Their eyes, that look of hope shining through desperation. I will never forget it as long as I live. We were catching bullets for them. We need to clear that anti-tank wall. In the easy red sector, a massive obstacle blocked our path. If the engineers didn't blow it, we'd be trapped on the sand and picked off one by one. Cover the engineers. That was the Sherman's tactic on D-Day. We weren't there to duel Tiger tanks. Thank God there were no Tigers on the beach that day. Our mission was to be mobile bunker busters. The Sherman's 75mm gun was mediocre against armor, but its high-explosive shell carried a heavy charge, devastatingly effective against infantry and soft targets. For the next hour, Ardennes was like a raging bull, charging back and forth across the sand. We fired every last chi shell we had and raked the German trenches with the Koch's machine gun. I watched another Sherman from the 741st survivors charge to within 20 meters of a German trench, crush the barbed wire with its tracks, and fire point-blank into the defenders. That kind of close-range shock shattered the psychological defense of the German front line. They were used to fighting artillery at a distance. When 30 tons of steel rolls right up to your face, even the most fanatical SS soldier feels fear. That is the power of Made in Detroit. We lost most of the DD tanks, but every surviving Sherman that morning did the work of an infantry battalion. But the battle had just begun. Breaking the beachhead didn't mean victory. Behind the hedgerows of Normandy, deep in the European interior, the real monsters, the 56-ton Tigers and 45-ton Panthers, were waiting for us. And we would have to pay for every mile of advance with numbers, speed, and the blood of countless brothers. If you thought Omaha Beach was the end of hell, you clearly haven't seen Normandy in July. We survived. We left that blood-soaked beach behind. But soon, we found ourselves falling into another trap. It had a pretty name, Bocage, but to the 741st Tank Battalion, it was the Green Maze of Death. Imagine cutting the farmland of Ohio into hundreds of tiny squares, each no bigger than a football field. Then, surround each square with earthen walls, 3 or 4 feet thick and 10 feet high, topped with ancient, tangled trees and incredibly dense shrubs. These walls didn't just block your vision, they were as hard as concrete. This was our battlefield. My Ardennes was like a clumsy bear trapped in a cage. The country lanes in Normandy were so narrow that only one tank could pass at a time, and the hedgerows on either side blotted out the sun. It meant our greatest asset, mobility, was completely nullified. "We can't fight like this," Kowalski kicked the road wheels in frustration after a skirmish where we retreated without even seeing the enemy. The second we turn a corner, there could be an 88 or a German with a Panzerfaust waiting for us. We can't see them, but they can hear our damn engines roaring from miles away. He was right. Here, the Sherman's height became a fatal flaw. When we tried to climb over those tall embankments, the tank's nose had to pitch up, exposing our belly, armored with only 38 millimeters of steel, to enemy fire. The Germans were smart. They hid anti-tank guns across the field or concealed those terrifying Panther tanks in the shadows of the hedges. I remember the engagement on July 10th. That was when we truly realized how far behind we were technologically. We were supporting the 29th Infantry Division to take a hill outside St. Lo. A platoon from A Company was on point. The radio was quiet until a sharp screech, like tearing canvas, ripped through the air. God, it's a Panther. I looked through the periscope. A fireball was raging at the crossroads ahead. It was the lead tank of A Company, a new M4A1 that had just been upgunned with the 76mm long barrel. We thought the new gun could handle German heavy armor, but in that moment, it didn't even get a chance to fire. A German Mark V Panther tank was blocking the road like a ghost. Its front armor was sloped, looking impenetrable. Its terrifyingly long 75mm L-70 gun was smoking. "All units, reverse, reverse!" I shouted. But that was the malice of the bocage. There was nowhere to retreat. The road behind us was blocked by a truck. The Panther rotated its turret, its movement elegant and cold, like the Grim Reaper choosing his next victim. It aimed at the second Sherman. Boom! The turret of the second Sherman was blown clean off. Even at 1,000 yards, the Panther's gun could punch through a Sherman like it was butter. And our short-barreled 75mm? At that distance, hitting its front armor would just be a loud knock on the door. That day, we lost 4 tanks and didn't even scratch the paint on that Panther. We were pinned down behind those damn hedges, unable to advance or retreat. Morale hit rock bottom. We started to suspect we were just mobile targets manufactured in Detroit. In that desperate hour, our salvation didn't come from the generals in Washington, nor from some secret weapon. It came from a sergeant named Curtis G. Cullen. It was a sultry afternoon in mid-July. We had pulled back to the rear for refitting. Everyone was complaining about the hedgerows. "If we have to climb these walls, we have to show our bellies to the Krauts," Harris grumbled while swabbing the boar. "We need giant gardening shears to cut these damn hedges open." Just then, an engineer officer walking by stopped. I'd heard in the briefing that Sergeant Cullen of the 102nd Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron had an idea. "Hey, Miller!" Old George, the battalion maintenance officer, ran over, waving a blueprint. "Bring Adeline over here. She's getting some dental work." I hopped down and saw a pile of strange scrap metal. It was the Czech hedgehogs, the anti-tank obstacles the Germans had left on the beach. Those steel beams, once meant to stop our landing, had been cut into massive, jagged teeth. "What the hell is this?" Kowalski asked. "It's called a rhino device," Old George explained as he directed welders to fuse the giant steel teeth onto the lower front hull of the Sherman. "With this, we don't have to climb the walls. We can ram right through them." That afternoon, sparks flew across the camp. We welded these sharp steel tusks onto every Sherman. Although it made the tanks look even uglier, like wild boars with metal fangs. The result shocked everyone when we tested it. Kowalski floored the gas. Adeline roared toward a thick earthen bank. Before, we would have crawled up clumsily like a turtle, but this time, the steel teeth bit deep into the dirt and roots. With the roar of the engine and the snapping of wood, the tank didn't pitch up. Instead, like a bulldozer, it tore a massive chunk of the hedgerow out by the roots, ripping a gaping hole in the wall. Amidst the dust, we burst into the field on the other side, the chassis level, the gun pointing forward. "It's a miracle!" Harris slapped his thigh in excitement. We can fire while breaching." In that moment, I realized the game had changed. The Germans held out because they turned every intersection and gap into a kill zone. They watched the known paths. But now, we could make our own paths. We could appear from anywhere. We were no longer rats trapped in a maze. We were the bulls tearing the maze down. July 25, 1944, Operation Cobra. This was the decisive day. We were going to break the Normandy stalemate and break out into the French interior. The morning air was vibrating, this time not from waves, but from the sky. Thousands of Allied bombers blocked out the sun, carpet bombing the German lines from Saint-Lô to Perrier. The earth trembled. Even miles away, we could feel the destructive power. As soon as the bombing stopped, we fired our engines. 741st, move out, stay off the roads, take the fields. Adeline charged the first hedgerow. Kowalski let out a yell as we slammed into it. The steel teeth tore through centuries-old roots, the earth crumbling away. Covered in branches and dust, We burst out of the greenery like a monster. There was a German dugout in the field. A few German paratroopers, covered in dust, were poking their heads out of a foxhole. They were watching the main road to their left. They never expected a tank to burst out of the bushes behind them. "Machine gun!" I shouted. The bow gunner and the coaxial gun opened up simultaneously. The German soldiers were cut down before they could even lift their Panzerfausts. "Keep moving, don't stop." We wove through the fields, smashing through hedgerow after hedgerow. This was our new tactic, infantry tank coordination. The infantry followed the tank. When we breached a gap, they used automatic fire to suppress the hedges on the flanks, preventing ambushes. We focused on knocking out bunkers and machine gun nests. But the Germans didn't break easily. When we pushed near Marigny, the real test came. Intelligence said the elite Panzer Lehr Division was dug in here. They had taken heavy losses in the bombing, but the survivors were desperate men. We were crossing an open field when suddenly a dark shape flashed behind a hedgerow to our right. "Tank, right side, 2 o'clock. Before I could focus, an armor-piercing round screamed past our turret, shearing a large tree in half. "It's an ambush!" Through the periscope, I saw a Panther tank under camouflage netting. It was well hidden. If that shot had been a fraction to the left, my head would be gone. "Smoke! Kowalski! Hard left! Get into that depression!" We popped the onboard smoke mortars. The Sherman lumbered into a turn. The Panther's second shot slammed into the dirt beside us, the clods of earth ringing against our armor. We stopped in the dip, gasping for air. "We can't penetrate it, Sarge." Harris's voice was shaking. "That's frontal armor. Our 75 won't even tickle it." I knew he was right. In these 2 months of fighting, we learned that going head-to-head with a Panther or Tiger was suicide. We had to flank. I scanned the terrain. The Panther was guarding the intersection. It thought we were trapped on the road, but it didn't know we had tusks. "Listen," I said over the intercom, my voice surprisingly calm. "Kowalski, see that thick-looking hedge on the left? That's his blind spot. We're not going back. We're going through it and coming up right behind his ass." "That looks thick, Sarge. If we fail, we're stuck there." "Then stomp on the gas. Move." The engine roared to its limit. Adeline slammed into the seemingly impassable green wall. The impact nearly rattled my teeth loose. Branches shrieked against the armor. For a second, I thought we were stuck, the track spinning in place. "Move, damn you!" Kowalski roared. Suddenly, the tank lurched forward. We broke through. We burst into the adjacent field. The Panther was less than 100 yards to our front left. Its turret was still pointing at the main road, completely exposing its vulnerable side and rear to us. This was the Sherman's chance. "A P, target, hull, side rear, range 80 yards. Harris's hands were steady. The turret spun fast. At that moment, the Panther commander must have sensed something. He turned his head in the cupola. I could almost see the look of horror on his face. "Go to hell, you Nazi bastard. Fire!" Boom! No ricochet this time. The 75mm M61 APCBC shell, at this point-blank range, drilled precisely into the thinnest part of the Panther's side armor, right above the tracks where the ammunition was stored. A split second of silence. Then, a violent explosion tore the 45-ton steel beast apart from the inside. A pillar of fire erupted from the commander's hatch and engine deck. The turret was lifted off its ring by the sheer force of the blast, settling askew. "Hit! Target destroyed!" Cheers erupted inside the tank. It was our first Panther kill. Not with better armor, not with a bigger gun, but with our brains, some scrap metal welded to our nose, and the courage to break the rules. As that plume of black smoke rose into the sky, I knew we had won. That afternoon, hundreds of rhino-equipped Shermans smashed through the hedgerows. The German line shattered. They couldn't comprehend why American tanks were pouring out from everywhere, appearing in their kitchen backyards, on the flanks of their HQs. That night, we camped by the ruins of a small town. I climbed out of the turret and looked at Adeline. She was scarred, draped in branches and mud. Those ugly steel teeth were welded to her front, and bullet gouges marred her sides. She didn't look like a polished weapon from a parade ground. She looked like a beast that had just clawed its way out of a swamp. I lit a cigarette, my hand still trembling slightly. We were leaving the damn bocage. I heard that ahead lay the flat plains of France. Patton's Third Army was active. There, we wouldn't be crawling anymore. We were going to run. But we also heard darker rumors. To the east, in the direction we were heading, the Germans were massing even crazier heavy tank battalions. And as our supply lines stretched, we would become vulnerable. The next battle might be even more brutal than this one. The autumn of 1944 was a muddy nightmare, but we pushed through. General Patton's Third Army sliced through the heart of France like a red-hot knife, and we raced almost all the way to the German border. During that time, Adeline finally gave out, not destroyed by the Germans, but worked to death. After thousands of miles, her engine finally seized, and the suspension snapped. It was just as well. Logistics sent us a new ride. We called her Adeline II. She was a brand new M4 A376W Sherman. When you first saw her, she looked sleeker, more lethal. She mounted a longer 76mm M1 gun. While it still wasn't enough to punch through a Panthers front plate at long range, at least we could fight back. Combined with the new high-velocity armor-piercing HVAP rounds, we were no longer toothless prey. Plus, she had wet stowage. The ammo racks were surrounded by jackets filled with water and glycerin. This drastically reduced the chance of catching fire when hit. The Ronson nickname was slowly becoming history. Mid-December, we were deployed to the Ardennes Forest on the border of Belgium and Luxembourg. It was called the Ghost Front. It was quiet here, too quiet. It made your skin crawl. We were told this was a rest area. The 741st was spread out, supporting the 2nd and 99th Infantry Divisions in defending this seemingly impassable forest. It was freezing. Temperatures dropped to near zero. Steel became sticky like ice. If you touched a hatch without gloves, it would tear your skin off. The oil congealed. Every morning, we had to light fires under the hull just to warm the oil pan enough to start the engine. Kowalski and I sat on the turret, wrapped in thick wool coats, holding coffee that had barely any warmth left. "Is this it, Sarge?" Kowalski looked toward the snow-capped German border. "Hitler's done, right? Maybe we'll be home by Christmas." I looked at the black forest shrouded in heavy fog, but the unease in my gut was growing like weeds. "Don't jinx it, Kowalski," I whispered. "As long as those krauts haven't surrendered, there are wolves hiding in those woods." Harris popped his head out from below, where he was cleaning the new gun. "I heard there's only a few Volksgrenadier divisions nearby, old men and kids. Aren't we being too jumpy?" If we had known what was hiding behind that forest, none of us would have slept. Behind that curtain of mist, the 1st SS Panzer Division and the 12th SS Panzer Division, Hitler Youth, were massing. Hundreds of tanks, including the newest King Tigers, sat with engines off, waiting for the final order. December 16th, 1944. 0530 hours. The world collapsed. It wasn't just a few guns. The entire horizon erupted in fire. Thousands of artillery shells hammered the American positions. Then came a sound we had never heard before, a mechanical rumble that felt like an earthquake. "Germans attacking! Battle stations!" The radio was filled with panicked screams. The frontline infantry divisions were torn apart instantly. Out of the blinding snow and thick fog, phalanxes of gray German tanks surged from the forest like a tidal wave. They weren't defending anymore. They had launched the largest counteroffensive on the Western Front since the war began. This was the beginning of what would be known as the Battle of the Bulge. The twin villages of Rosherath Krinkelt, where we were stationed, became the critical knot holding back the German advance. The next 3 days were a blur of chaos. We fought not just the Germans, but the weather. Fog locked down the sky, grounding our powerful Air Force. That meant no P-47 Thunderbolts to crack those tin cans open for us. We were on our own. Adeline II maneuvered through a white hell. Snow was knee-deep. The roads were ice. "Hard right! Movement behind that barn!" We were locked in a savage urban brawl. The fighting here was indescribably brutal. Sometimes the distance between us and the enemy was only 50 yards. A German Panzer IV burst around a corner, their workhorse medium tank. "AP, take him out!" Our 76mm gun roared. At this range, the M62 shell easily punched through the Panzer IV's front. It turned into a fireball instantly. "Don't celebrate, reverse!" We backed behind the wall just as an 88mm shell obliterated the second story of the building we had been next to. Bricks and timber rained down on our hull. "That was a big one." Harris's voice trembled. For the next 48 hours, we barely slept. We were like firemen, plugging holes wherever the line was about to break. Infantrymen lay in snow holes, frost on their eyelashes, looking at our Sherman like we were messiahs. But I knew the real test was coming. Intelligence reported the heavy armor battalion of the 12th SS was approaching the twin villages. That meant King Tigers. The King Tiger, a 69-ton monster. Front armor 150 millimeters thick and sloped. Its 88mm L-71 gun could peel open any Allied tank like a sardine can from 2,000 meters. And my 76mm gun? Unless I could get within 100 meters of its side, I was just polishing its paint job. Night of December 19th. The blizzard paused for a moment, but the temperature plunged even lower. The twin villages were now burning ruins. We were ordered to hold the east intersection at all costs. If this fell, the gate to Elsenborn Ridge would open, and the entire northern shoulder of the American line would collapse. We hid Adeline II behind the wreckage of a collapsed house, hull down, only the turret exposed. To camouflage, we whitewashed the hull and draped white bed sheets over it. Listen. Kowalski cut the engine. Through the howling wind came a heavy, low grinding sound, like something from the depths of hell. It was the sound of wide tracks crushing frozen earth and masonry. A massive dark shape emerged, illuminated by the fires of burning houses. It was immense, bigger than a Tiger Fury. The long barrel stretched forward like a telephone pole. King Tiger, I felt my throat go dry. Range 400 yards. "Do we fire?" Harris asked. "Don't be stupid. That angle is frontal. Our shells will just bounce off and give away our position." We held our breath, watching the beast advance slowly. Its turret rotated, searching for prey. Behind it followed a squad of SS Grenadiers in white snow camo. Just then, an M10 tank destroyer lying in ambush to my left lost its nerve. Boom! A 76mm shell struck the King Tiger's turret face. Clang! A sharp metallic ring. Sparks flew. The shell was ruthlessly deflected by the thick, sloped armor, spinning off into the night sky. The monster stopped. The turret slowly turned to the left. "No, M10, run!" I screamed inside my head. Boom! The King Tiger's 88 fired. The massive muzzle blast blew away the surrounding snow. The M10 was instantly vaporized, burning parts raining down everywhere. That was the gap in power. In the face of absolute strength, courage looked so fragile. "It's turning," Kowalski said in terror. "It's looking our way." The King Tiger's machine gunner seemed to have spotted our camouflage net. A stream of tracers swept over us, kicking up dust from the brick wall in front of us. "We're spotted. Reverse or..." "Nowhere to reverse." I looked at the rubble behind us. We were trapped. In that moment, I remembered a tactic we learned in training camp but rarely used in combat. Harris, load white phosphorus. WP. Now, I yelled. What? Smoke. That won't kill it. Do as I say. That's what we need. Blind the bastard. The 76mm Sherman carried not just AP and HE, but white phosphorus smoke rounds. These shells didn't just create smoke. The burning phosphorus stuck to surfaces, burning intensely at thousands of degrees and creating toxic fumes. WP loaded. Aim for his turret vision blocks. Fire. Boom. The shell burst against the king tiger's thick frontal armor. It didn't penetrate, of course. That wasn't my goal. A splash of blinding white fire and dense white smoke instantly engulfed the tiger's bow and turret. The burning phosphorus stuck like a parasite to the armor plates, splashing into the driver's vision slit and the ventilation intakes. The king tiger panicked. Its turret began to swing wildly. The tank's ventilation system was sucking the external phosphorus smoke inside the crew compartment. For the Germans inside, it was like being thrown into a gas chamber. Hit him again. Give him more. The second WP round hit dead on. The king tiger turned into a giant torch in the dark night. Moments later, the heavy commander's hatch flew open. Several German tankers, coughing violently and faces covered in soot, scrambled out, stumbling into the snow. They couldn't stand the choking smoke and heat. They had to abandon ship. Machine gun, sweep them. The Coke's gun didn't miss the opportunity. That invincible king tiger, that monster with impenetrable armor, was stopped by 2 smoke shells. It was still intact, but it was dead. That is the American way of fighting. I slumped into my commander's seat, soaked in cold sweat. After Christmas, the sky finally cleared. That morning, when we heard the familiar drone in the sky, many men wept. Thousands of Allied planes filled the air. P-47s dove like vultures onto the German heavy tanks that sat paralyzed in the snow, out of fuel. The Battle of the Bulge was over. Hitler's final gamble was lost. The following months were an unstoppable flood. We crossed the Rhine and drove into the heart of Germany. The smokestacks of the Ruhr industrial district no longer smoked. The factories that built the Tigers were piles of rubble. May 1945. The war ended. I parked Adeline II by a small German river and washed my face. Looking at my reflection in the water, I saw I had aged 10 years. The cheerful kid from Ohio was gone, replaced by a veteran with cold eyes and a face full of stubble. 1985, Ohio, USA. I pull myself out of the memories. The pipe in my hand has gone out. My grandson looks at me, his eyes shining. So, Grandpa, was the Sherman the best tank? I smile, and this time, it is a genuine smile. No, kid, it wasn't the toughest, and it didn't have the biggest gun. In a duel, it often lost to those German monsters. I point to the black and white photo on the mantle. Me, Kowalski, Harris, and Joe standing in front of Adeline. But it could run. It was easy to fix when it broke. It could be made by the thousands. When the German Tigers were stuck on the roadside out of gas or with broken transmissions, our Shermans were still moving forward. If one was destroyed, 10 more came up to take its place. I pat my grandson on the head. War isn't won by superweapons. It's won by the ordinary, reliable things, and by the ordinary men sitting inside them who, knowing their equipment is inferior, still dare to charge. That is the story of the Sherman. She wasn't perfect, but she carried us through the blood of Normandy, through the ice of the Ardennes, and she brought us home.